It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, episode 99 of the Steelers Afternoon Drive. What's going on?
I'm still not sick of the theme song. I still love it. It still gets me fired up every time. It gets me ready to go. I'm ready. I'm ready.
So we're not like fully on the screens yet, but like the way that the software, the website that we use works is like we have these two lower parts of the screens where we can still see each other. And while that music's playing, we're both just getting in the zone with the music. So I agree, 100 episodes down, I could 1,000 plus more episodes, this exact same intro. Looking forward to it. Alan, you mentioned we're going to preface by saying we're going to talk about a lot about Mike Tomlin today. Let's preface by saying that in this episode. Yesterday when he spoke, it was interesting to you. It was also interesting to myself based off of maybe he's just trying to divert the conversation because it's always about the offense to his defense and talking about not being good enough. 21 points in the first half against the Patriots. I certainly agree that they weren't good enough in that first half against the Patriots. But when you have the offensive performances that the Steelers have put out there weekly, and you're talking about, the number 7 scoring defense on the other side of the football than that, how can you possibly divert the conversation from one side of the football to the side of the football where you actually have had success? I don't know. I mean, this is where I want to start the conversation, see where it goes. But does it surprise you at all, or is this just because this is what their identity is and Mike Tomlin realizes they need to be, not just top 7, but the best if they are going to have success?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tomlin started his post-game press conference saying, like, hey, they got 7 off their turnover and we didn't get any, and that was the difference in the game. And he kind of doubled down, saying, hey, our defense needs to get a stop there. Not like Mitch Trubisky needs to not throw the ball into triple coverage straight at Jabril Peppers.
Yeah.
On his own 30-yard line. Not that. That's not where he started. Not we need to take better care of the football. Not like our offense can't put our defense in that position. He came out and just said, our defense needs to give up 3, not 7 there. And I understand that's not a very good offense that hasn't scored a lot this year. Mm-hmm. But it sure feels like the message Mike Tomlin is sending to the locker room is, guys, look, this offense sucks. It's not going to get better. If we are going to go anywhere with this season, this defense has to be darn near perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it after, because it's kind of similar to his remarks following, was it maybe the Jaguars one where he said they weren't advantageous turnovers? Or there was a time earlier in the season where during one of his press conferences, he was talking about that, they turned the football over, but they weren't advantageous.
They got turnovers, but it was only in midfield. They didn't set them up at the 10. It just feels like Mike Tomlin feels like this is the only way his team can win, is to have just dominant defense. I mean, they're all, like I said, they're 7th in points. I don't know where they are. They've been in the top 5 in turnovers all year. Now they are still giving up yards, and certainly they can be better. I do think that the defense has, especially situationally, underperformed in some ways. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying it's a notable focus for the head coach of a team that is 7th in defense and 27th in offense to be worried about the defense first and foremost. That's not the way that usually goes.
Yeah, and if you look the defense on a per play basis, the EPA and everything, it's near the top of the league as well. It might be skewed where it looks more like league average because of how much time they're spending on the field. But that even goes back to it. They're not getting balance. They're not getting support from the offense. They're spending too much time on the field. If you could get that, I mean, we go back to that conversation where they, dominated time of possession against Cincinnati, the one time that they really did that this year. And TJ, that's when, we talked about it on here. TJ said, we feel like there's still another level to this defense. If we are able to stay fresh, if we're able to win the time of possession on the other side, this is the type of defense that we can be. And we haven't been able to see that for really other than that one game because the offense hasn't controlled the clock. They haven't consistently converted on third downs and kept the football in their hands. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing for Tomlin to focus on more, but to your point, it probably is just self-scouting, a realization of what this football team needs to be, because you're kind of dealing with the situation you have in your hands.
Well, I guess it kind of opens the question, right, as to what exactly it is. Is it what you just said? Is it self-scouting and self-awareness that look, he's fired the offensive coordinator. like there's only so much that you can do. Like at this point, like you're not going to change the scheme. There are only so many players you can change. Like there's only so much you can do at week 15 of the season to make real impactful changes to a unit, right? And Mike Tomlin has tried most of those things. We're on the second offensive play caller. We're on the second quarterback. Like he's made changes to the starting members of the offensive line. Like I don't know where else really he could reasonably expect to go with this offense to feel like he was making changes that could make it better. So I understand that from a right here, right now standpoint. But I think it really raises the question of like, is this the team that Mike Tomlin wants? Like, does he want to just win with defense and get by on offense? Because I think that is a perception that a lot of people have. And I'm not sure that we have a lot of like evidence over the last few years that I can like sort of point to refute that. Like, it sure seems like when you have a Ben Roethlisberger, you're going to do the things that you do when you have a Ben Roethlisberger. But it feels like a lot of the decisions the Steelers have made since the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger and even leading up to the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger, it kind of feels like this is the team that somebody there wanted, right?
I guess that's just like, why would you want your life to be harder than it has to be? Like, at least on offense. Like, again, I understand Mike Tomlin's, background, everything. He's more of a defensive coach. When you've been around this long, obviously he's going to have his hand in the offense too. But like, I just, for the life of me, can't figure out what the reason would be that he would want to make things harder for himself in that way.
I don't know. Like I get it, but like also look, it's the most expensive defense on paper, has been for the last two seasons. Part of that is just the cycle of contracts. I understand that they're not paying big money to a quarterback, nearly everyone else is. But like at some point, that is someone out there saying, yes, this is fine. We're okay with spending almost all of our money on defense. Like, I don't know. And obviously I do believe that Art Rooney fundamentally believes that the Steelers should be a running and defense football team, that is their tradition, their heritage, and the way that they ought to be put together. I'm not necessarily saying this is all Mike Tomlin, but it sure feels like while he may be frustrated with the results right now, there was some intelligent design here in this team that needs its defense. Like they didn't get here by accident.
Yeah, I'm like in my head going through. I understand like when you talk about retaining guys, paying out money, obviously the big Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, like those all being on the defensive side, but like obviously 2020 didn't have a first round pick, so their first pick spent on Chase Claypool offense. 2021 Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, Kendrick Green, Dan, like all offense basically in that one. Now where there's good picks, obviously not. 2022 obviously Kenny, George, and then 2023 Broderick in the first round. Like they've invested draft capital there. Now you can maybe question some of those picks themselves. So it seems like there's interest, obviously, in getting better on the offensive side of the football. I don't know if the process all around has been there, obviously, and that can go into the conversation in terms of obviously the coaching staff that they've built.
Yeah.
Too. So
and again, it goes into the like, okay, the Steelers are probably going to hire an outside offensive coordinator this offseason. I know some people still don't believe that they're going to. I can't even possibly fathom them doing anything else. Like that's
just not trusting the Steelers to history to do so. Yeah,
I don't care how little you trust the Steelers to do anything right, which I don't understand why people don't. They're one of the best run franchises in all of sports, not just the NFL. But like, look, the Steelers, there's no chance they cannot bring in an outside offensive coordinator at this point. But like, look, if this is like the team of Mike Tomlin's choosing, I think it really brings into question, like, should he, like, the process that led to Matt Canada being the offensive coordinator and remaining the offensive coordinator with no help and no real passing game prowess and additions to that group for this year, like, was that on purpose? Was that because they don't want to do it? Was that because they want a team that is defense and running game first and they don't care about throwing the football or having a dynamic offense? Like, I don't know. I don't know how we'll ever find the answers to those questions. But man, like, if they were, then I don't know how you would have faith in the next one turning out better.
Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% agree. And with Canada, you look back on hindsight, and again, this is just, an issue in the process because we've talked about like Matt Canada, there's some good things in his track record in terms of what he could do for a run game, right? And if the
Yeah.
Steelers at their core wanted to be a running football team, okay, on the surface, like the hire you could say made sense. But then you draft a quarterback in the first round. And again, whether you're expecting him to be like a franchise guy or not, or just be able to be the quarterback for this specific team, the way that they're building it around him, to not have a guy on the staff that has ever developed a quarterback and instead have Matt Canada be his offensive coordinator, the first one, and up to this point, the really only one that he's been in an offense for. Again, this is a fundamental issue with the process here and the way that the Steelers have done things on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, and like I've had this, I've spoken this theory before. It's not new, probably on this podcast before. But like I don't think the Steelers. I think the Steelers had a plan. I think that plan that I'm talking about, this idea that you can just run the ball, rely on defense, and just do enough on offense to get by. I think that plan has some merit in the when you're looking at the idea of moving on from Ben Roethlisberger, because you're probably going to have some kind of journeyman quarterback like Mitch Trubisky in there. The Steelers were not going to draft well enough to get a top of the class quarterback, a guy that you came in and really expected to just turn things around quickly, right? They needed a plan to be good, even if they weren't going to be great, while they moved on from Ben on offense. And I think that plan and the hiring of Matt Canada as part of that plan, as a guy who had a dynamic rushing offense, kind of made some sense. Like I defended the hire at the time, and while it certainly did not work out, I still think there was an intelligent thought process behind it. But as soon as you drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round, all that fell apart, right? When you got a guy that you needed to develop and that you expected you should be able to develop into a starting quarterback, you needed someone on that staff with the ability to do it. Someone that either had done it themselves as a professional quarterback or someone that had a history of developing professional quarterbacks. Like, it's very obvious that Mike Sullivan is not that guy. It was very obvious that Canada was not that guy. And all they did coming into this offseason was add Glenn Thomas, who got let go by Arizona State. Like, I don't know if Glenn Thomas is a good coach or a bad coach, but that's not any kind of track record to bet on. It doesn't mean anything. Like, there's no reason to think this offense should be better than it is with the scheme and the staff that they put together. And so how does it go forward? I don't know. I think it really, the Steelers are very consistent, fairly conservative, and a fairly easy predict franchise. Like, most of the time, they make my life as a guy who's supposed to sound smart talking about the Steelers really easy, because I know what they're going to do almost all the time. I have no idea what is going to happen here going forward with the direction of this franchise in terms of the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the front, how all this comes together in terms of the product in the field. Because I don't know, man, it's just weird that like there's Mike Tomlin almost makes it sound like he's okay with having an offense this bad if only his defense could be a little bit better. And to me, that is just, I understand not wanting to kick a unit when it's down, but that is just deeply flawed thinking and probably not like fit for the modern NFL.
Now, whether he actually believes that or if that is just lip service, again, with how close to the vest they keep things and stuff like that, I have a hard time believing he doesn't realize what is going on offense and being okay with it. That would be very, very hard to believe. But at the end of the day, it is a results-oriented business, and as long as they're winning football games, maybe he doesn't have an issue with what's going on the offensive side of the football. Alan, here's the thing too, like we're talking about, they did this, they went into Kenny's rookie year with his coaching staff and then ran it back again, adding just Glenn Thomas to it. Like, we're not just talking about one season where this was the coaching staff. And that's why you're talking about like the future of Mike Tomlin stuff. We said, was it following the Arizona game or maybe on Friday following the New England one, like how much of this falls on Mike Tomlin and like, should he be able to be part of the future? Now, like, we don't know how that conversation is going on behind closed doors in terms of Mike Tomlin's future, but like without knowing what the process is, if Mike Tomlin didn't want this to be the coaching staff and like was kind of handcuffed because of powers above him, okay, then so be it. But like if he was 100% on board with his coaching staff, went to bat with it, didn't see an issue and didn't want to make changes, then he is a massive part of the Steelers' failures on offense.
Yeah, and then I think I don't know how you can feel good about you have to identify the failures in your own processes and fix them, right? As a business leader, right? You have to you have to look at you have to look at your failures and say, okay, why didn't this work? Where did we go wrong? And if Mike Tomlin was the person that was primarily advocating for the Steelers coaching staff to look the way it did, and it's not just like it was like you were saying, it's not just like it was one failure. It's not like it was one bad decision. It was like multiple sort of repeated bad decisions. Like the hire of Canada, like I said, okay, maybe made some sense. Turned out to be a bad decision, but I can maybe make some sense. Okay, then ran it back with Canada. Okay, then ran it back with Canada and no one else. Like there was all these decisions that have been made over and over again on the offensive side of the ball that have not gone well. And the decision, it does not look like Kenny Pickett was a very good choice with the 20th overall draft pick right now. Maybe that will feel differently about that. They get a more competent offensive coordinator in here, but right now that looks like a bad decision. The decision to draft Najee Harris with a first round pick does not look like a good decision right now. He's being outplayed by an undrafted free agent. He's, it does not seem like the efforts on the offensive side of the ball are really going a positive direction. Where is that problem occurring? And I think we have to really be open to the idea that it's Mike Tomlin. I'm not saying that it is, but I think we should be open to that idea.
Yeah. And real quick, just your thoughts on the rest of, because, Tyler and I had a conversation about just literally going down the pecking order here and talking about everybody on the offensive coaching staff, that is. Among those, how would you evaluate pretty much everybody, all position coaches, everybody that has a role in this offense? And who would you think would be back next year? Who do you think is a good shot? That we've talked about Frisman Jackson a little bit on here, but other than him,
I mean, other than Eddie Faulkner,
Alfredo, maybe
Alfredo Roberts. I don't see a lot of guys on this offensive staff that have put their flag in the ground and said, hey, look at these guys that I've developed that are done so well that you can't fire me. I just don't see it. I honestly think look, man, let's talk about the offensive line. Kevin Dotson's playing really well in LA. Isaac Seumalo is playing worse in Pittsburgh than he did in Philadelphia. That's a concerning tandem. Right? That's when you have a guy leave and he does better, and you bring a guy in and he does worse. I don't know how you don't point at some fingers there at the coaching staff, right? I think that has to happen. Tight end, I guess. I don't know. Pat's been hurt. It's been hard. They seem to have found something in Hot Rod. Connor Hayward's been playing okay. I don't know. I guess Alfredo Roberts has done well enough, and he's also kind of a pretty well-respected guy that I think maybe it'd stick around. But offensive line and quarterbacks and wide receivers, man, I think those guys probably don't have a lot of job security right now.
I asked you, I think a couple weeks ago, about Pat Meyer. Is his future really attached to what we see from Broderick Jones? But I think it's interesting, is he even going to be afforded the opportunity to see all of Broderick Jones' development because of the way that the other pieces have played? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. You don't see this a lot in the NFL. Usually guys keep their jobs. Some not even when coordinators come and go, but I could very well see a massive overhaul of the Steelers offensive staff this offseason. I really could see that happening.
And I'm totally on board with it. Alan, I think it's interesting though that this got put out too. We've talked a lot about Mike Tomlin. I think let's just continue the conversation. Jay Glazer putting out there that the Washington Commanders should pursue a move for Mike Tomlin. And this is interesting. There's been smoke in the past with Mike Tomlin in Washington, but I think why it's so interesting is Jay Glazer being the one to put this out there. He doesn't seem like the type of guy to really just throw something against the wall like this. And he also has a relationship with Mike Tomlin. So pretty interesting stuff there.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin is not a guy that's super friendly buddy with a lot of the media. Jay Glazer might be the exception to that. They have a pretty extensive relationship. I have a really hard time thinking that Jay Glazer would suggest something like this if Mike Tomlin either thought, one, I would never work for the crappy Washington Commanders, or two, I would never want to not work for the Pittsburgh Steelers. right? Like if Mike Tomlin felt either of those things, then I have a real hard time believing that Jay Glazer would be the one to bring it up. It's easy for me to say it, right? But like, I mean, Jay Glazer and Mike Tomlin are friends. Like they're fairly close. So that's really eye opening to me. That he would suggest something like that. It tells me that, yeah, if somebody came into Mike Tomlin with that proposal, I don't think the answer would be an immediate no. That's what that tells me. Now, would it work out? I don't know, but like it does not seem to be like. Remember when somebody asked Mike Tomlin about whether he would coach in college again, and the answer was like, there isn't a booster with a big enough check. You're not going to get that kind of sarcastic, dismissive answer from Mike Tomlin about would you coach the Washington Commanders. First of all, it's the team he grew up as a fan of, and some of his coaching idols coached there. And so like Joe Gibbs, I believe there was like a relationship there. Like I think it's something that Mike Tomlin would consider. And so I think it's something that we probably should not be dismissive of, even though NFL coaches are not traded very often. And it would certainly be like a wholly uncharted territory for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a franchise.
Yeah.
When was the last time a former Steelers head coach coached for someone else? Because they went straight from their coaches being so bad that no one else would ever want them to Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher never coaching again. Man, I'd have to like it. It might be a very long time since a former Steelers head coach coached for another NFL team. That's an interesting thought, but yeah, I mean, so certainly would be groundbreaking in terms of Bill Austin was the Steelers' last head coach before Chuck Noll, and he coached 1 year in 1970 with the Washington Redskins as their head coach before never coaching as a head coach. He had a long career after that as an assistant. But man, I don't know. I guess I feel like this is something we should probably at least be open to.
Clean slate for him, fresh starts, but also from the organization side, like this is going to be, they just got new ownership in there. It seems like they're looking for a fresh start. This would be the first head coach that they hired. Obviously, Ron Rivera hasn't been fired yet, still in place there, but I think it's kind of expected that they'll move in a different direction after this season. So yeah, for both sides, I think you can make the case that it makes sense. Now, from the Pittsburgh Steelers side, does it? Or are they going to really say, hey, Mike, we appreciate everything that you've done. If this is the direction that you want to go, we're willing to accommodate that.
Well, yeah, I guess here's the thing. Like, I have a very hard time that the Steelers would say, Mike, we don't want you to be our coach anymore, when Mike does want to be the coach, and then say, and by the way, we're going to trade you somewhere. Like, I have a hard time seeing that play out in that way. But look, maybe if Mike comes to the Steelers and says, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, then would a trade help the team more than me just leaving? I can see that being reasonable. Okay. I don't know. It's just it's a hard needle to thread.
And from his standpoint, though, wouldn't he not want the team that he's going to give up draft capital? Like, so
right.
It could be
yeah.
his
Like, I don't know. Like, I just think it's a very tough needle to thread to find a head coach trade that makes sense for everyone. Then again, like I guess the Steelers could just tell him to stay home for a year, pay him his contract. The Steelers have been extremely reticent to pay coaches to not coach in their they don't even do it with coordinators, let alone with head coaches. I don't know. It still seems relatively far-fetched to me. I'm not saying I think this is likely, but I think we probably need to not just totally discount the possibility.
I think it's more of a conversation now than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And that's
well, I was on the Fan with Josh Roundtree over the weekend, and he asked me, like, okay, percentage, like, what do you think of the chances of Mike Tomlin coming back is? And I was like, I think 70-30 he's back. But if you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said 95-5. Like, things are moving quickly here. And I think what happens in these last 4 weeks really will tell a lot of this story. Like, if they win 3 of 4 make the playoffs. Like, and Chris Carter, I was on a Locked On Steelers podcast with Chris Carter last night. He said, look, the top teams in the AFC are better than the Steelers, but they are also showing us week in and week out that they are beatable. Like, the Dolphins just lost to the Titans. The Chiefs have dropped games. Like, it's not crazy to think that the Steelers could just sneak in and then win a game. Like, I don't think that we should feel like just because the results of the last 2 games were quite possibly the worst 5-day stretch in modern team history, that like things are over. Like, I don't know, go beat the Colts and all of a sudden you look really good for a playoff spot again. That's all it would really take. Get Kenny Pickett back and who knows? Like, I don't know. I think there's a big swing in the way you feel about the Steelers team based on the outcome of these last 4 games. They go 0-4, then I think maybe less than 50% that Mike Tomlin comes back. If they go 3 out of 4 and then go win a playoff game, I think it's 100. Like, and I don't think that either of those extremes are like particularly unlikely at this point.
Yeah. And based off what you're saying, that you could argue that this is like the biggest stretch of games the last month here of, I don't want to say of his entire tenure, because obviously we've played more meaningful football, but like one of the bigger stretches of Steelers football within these last 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not in terms of like the stakes for the results, but in terms of like the long-term trajectory of the team, man, like up there.
Yeah.
Got some comments we want to hit?
Yeah, I wanted to get to at least this one here from my guy Hayden Bishop. He DM'd me it on X, and he also sent it in the YouTube comments yesterday. Okay, we got to make one correction here, by the way, Hayden, because I appreciate that you're a fan, but you'll see the issue when I start reading this. Hey, Zachary, appreciate the use of the full name there. I'm a huge fan.
The formality of this, it's Zachary. I had to make sure that this wasn't like your aunt or something. Hayden, I guess uncle, right? Like,
I picture
like
he would like pull out a pen.
Like a little like dipped it in the fountain pen in the ink, Dearest Zachary.
So he's a huge fan of the North Shore Drive podcast.
We're the afternoon. We understand there are a lot of podcasts with the word drive in the name. Far more than maybe I realized when we picked it, but like, afternoon drive. We're the ones with the creepy van. Come on.
You and Alan are a great duo with you navigating the conversation.
He does know how to get his comment read on our show, though. He has mastered that part of it. He knows who he's talking to. There's no question about that.
Yeah, for sure. I had a question I was hoping you could talk about on the podcast sometime. That time will be right now. We pride ourselves on never having a losing season under Mike Tomlin. Don't get me wrong, consistency is great, but I feel like we've been hovering in the middle of the pack for the past few seasons. Don't think it's a great place to hang out for too long. I'd rather be competing for a playoff run or rebuilding with top 10 draft picks. How easy do you think it is to build around Kenny / find a new franchise quarterback if we keep going 9-8, getting the 20th pick year after year? This is interesting because I feel like this kind of plays off. Remember the episode that we had last week before we played the Patriots of like, which team's position would you rather be in? And this is kind of going along with that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real hard part is quarterback if it's not Kenny, right? Like, I think almost everything else you can live in the 15 to 25 draft pick realm and get what you need to get. I think the Steelers have shown that over the years. Quarterback is the big question. If it turns out not to be Kenny Pickett, can they find a good enough quarterback to get them to where they want to go without getting a top 5 draft pick? They can. I mean, look, we know that it's possible. We've seen them. We got, Jalen Hurts, 2nd round pick. Brock Purdy, 7th round pick. Like, there's guys that have done well that have been free agents, right? I mean, Kirk Cousins.
A little bit of recency bias here because I was so impressed with what he did last night. But like, what if Will Levis turns out to be the guy in Tennessee?
2nd round pick, right? Yeah. Like, I don't think it's a lost cause, but I think it. Like, here's the thing: the Steelers' defense is pretty good, as we talked about at the beginning of this episode. But these guys are not that young. Do you want to use another 2 to 4 years and probably the last 2 to 4 years of Cam Hayward's career, and probably the last best 2 to 4 years of TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick's career, chasing another rookie quarterback. I don't know. I think that's a tough question to answer. I don't really know if there's a right or a wrong one there. It's certainly like, I think it really does though. Like, would it be the worst thing in the world for this team to like bottom out every once in a while and just have a bad year? Like, I don't know. I'm just not sure how you separate the performance of the players that you're going to need the following year from that result. Like, yes, would it be okay if the Steelers lost all the rest of their games so they get a better draft pick? Sure. But like, think about the things that have to happen for the Steelers to lose those games and the players that the Steelers are relying on in 2024 that would then have to play extremely poorly for the Steelers to lose all those games. And it's like, how does that work? I don't know. I think it's an easier thing to think about in theory than it is to deal with in reality.
And the mounting frustration of the players, only if they end the season on like a 6-game losing streak, like we're talking about right here, man.
George Pickens might like fight half the locker room. Like, I don't know, like that, like you could have some like unsurvivable stuff happen to the players on this team if they go 0-4. I mean, you're talking about like careers ending based on that result. Like, you can't just say like, oh, you take the Steelers team as it is right now, add a 10-pick higher draft pick to it, and then let's go get them in 2024. Like, that's not how it works. You have to absorb the losses that happen along the way. By the way, that's why the Browns are the Browns. That's why teams get stuck in that cycle and stay in that cycle, because being bad is toxic and horrible and awful to a team culture, and it's really, really hard to pull yourself out of it. Like, I just don't like it's tough.
Then you have
get a year where like everybody gets hurt. Like, if the Bengals this year had just been like, hey, we got no Joe Burrow, like, sorry, we just couldn't do it. Like, then it's one thing there. Then you can kind of just like say like, hey, we still like our team. We'll get them next year. We'll be right back into it. But unless you just have like all your good players get hurt, I don't see how you make it happen.
Yeah, imagine if the Bengals would have just bottomed out, ended up with like a top 10 pick to add to that roster next year, get Joe back. Yeah,
like, we lost T. Higgins. Darn, we drafted Marvin Harrison. Like, it could have happened too. Like, it's not that far fetched. Like that, like that kind of thing. I think you can say is pretty unquestionably okay to happen. It's just that, like, man, the Steelers are gonna have to play pretty bad football to bottom out here. And it's going to have to be guys that the Steelers want to be playing good, doing the bad for that to happen. And that's probably more bad than it is good.
Yep. I 100% agree. Yep. Alan, I think that will do it for this episode. A lot of good stuff in here. A lot of Mike Tomlin conversation. Let us know how you feel in the comments about all that stuff. But Alan, tell the people where they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on Twitter. PGH Steelers Now sites account, SteelersNow.com. You can check out that appearance with me and Chris Carter on the Locked On Steelers podcast, aired this morning over on his YouTube page. And make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube page. Keep going. And episode 100 of the Steelers Afternoon Drive tomorrow. Thank you, Smitty, so much for counting, because I would have never thought to do that. And
I just knew we were getting close, so I looked and I was like, oh, today's 98. So like, good timing on my part to go ahead and check on the playlist to see how many we were at. But yeah, 100 tomorrow. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. I said hit us in the comments. We want comments, questions, kind words, no negative words. No, if you feel the need to, I guess, go ahead and do that. What still helps out the algorithm. So yeah, go ahead and say whatever you want.
All the comments. Yeah. But you have, but like, we're not going to read it if you call us jerks. Like, but if you say how great we are, just saying.
Or you can disagree with us too. That's fine.
You can disagree with us. Yeah. That's fine. We're not always right.
Well, in my case, very rarely am. Leave us a 5-star review if you're listening somewhere else, whether it's Apple, Spotify, any of the other podcast platforms. Until tomorrow for episode 100, for Alan Saunders and myself, you can find me at Zachary Smith, PGH. Until then, thank you for taking a ride with us on another Steelers Afternoon Drive.